these feelings that we have with adversity. It's not just about anger and sadness. It's about asking yourself, well, what is it that I'm hungering for? What is it that I want to find out of this that I'm not getting because of this adversity in my life? The very first thing when I hear adversity, the very first thing that I say to myself, I don't say, why did this happen to me? What I say is, what is this trying to teach me? And the second thing I say is, and what did I contribute to this to make this adverse situation? Because in my experience, what I have landed on is that most of the adversity in my life was created probably by myself.
Right.
And I think that's the case for most of us. But I think that struggle helps you think better, communicate better, make better decisions.
Right. Hey everyone, this is Rod Cate and welcome to Rocket Motivation. This week's guest is a speaker, author, educator, and coach. He obtained a Ph.D. from the University of Southern Mississippi and currently is the director at Middle Tennessee State University CBHS Center for Student Coaching and Success. He's come a long way from his childhood, suffering from a condition that severely restricted his vision. He failed grades 1 through 6 and was told by a psychologist he would go through life as a functional literate and would top out by working menial jobs. He's going to tell you his story, his journey, and how to use adversity to your advantage.
3, 2, 1.
Colby Jubenville, welcome to Rocket Motivation.
Rod, I feel like I'm back in Mobile, Alabama, right there in the deep fried studios with Johnny Gwynn, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Thank you.
Well, we're glad to have you. Now, Colby, I kind of summarized what you're doing now in your life, but if you would put some little meat on the bones, tell us what it is that you do.
Yeah, well, and I want to go back to the opening statement there. I did perform poorly in school and had great teachers and coaches at St. Paul's along the way that certainly helped me figure it out, albeit through summer school or whatever mechanism might be in place to do that. But today I spend my time doing what I said I would do back in 10th grade, 8th grade. I coach and teach on an ever increasing stage. And so I go all over the country and speak about ideas like the intersection of personal brands and personal relationships and emotional intelligence and connection and write books around how to get paid for your value versus your time and personal branding and love to do all those kinds of things. I love the relationships that I've made along the way. And certainly I love the one-on-one coaching and education that I do as well.
Okay. Now let's go back to your childhood. This is a big part of your story. So tell us about your vision problems that you were born with, how it affected you and how you overcame it.
Well, I was born premature. I was probably born 2 or 3 pounds. And I was born with something called remnants of the pupillary membrane. Basically, for your audience, it's being born with spider webs over your eyes. And when I look back on my life and I look at where I find myself today, I think that ultimately that was meant to be a part of my life. If you look at all human beings are at some point in their lives, we all live in some form of conflict. And when you are in conflict, you cannot be at your best. And I've learned that when I've worked with other people. You cannot be at your best when you're in conflict. But what you do need is conflict to accelerate growth. And so I was born with conflict, with spider webs over my eyes. And thankfully, I was born to 2 educators who taught me the way you take on the world is to become an educator and marry an educator and educate other people. And my mother taught me how to learn in a different way. And I was able to teach myself to become an auditory learner. And so one of the gifts that I have today is to be able to listen to other people, understand what they're trying to say, and give it back to them in a very simple and easy way. And so I think that certainly is the best place to start about my story and certainly is a foundational piece to who I am today.
And so, your vision issues, as a kid and growing up with that, that shaped your life. Right?
Yeah, it did. That vision issue was the centerpiece to a theme that I've seen in all stages of my life, which is how to use adversity to accelerate growth. When I look at your idea of rocket motivation, I think that's what rocket motivation is, right? Everybody that comes on this show has some piece of adversity, and they've used it to accelerate growth. One of the things that you talk about in your book, Get Back Up, it makes me think about what are the different definitions of success. And for some people, success is getting up off the ground one more time. Athletes know that. We all know that, right? Success is the continued expansion of happiness. Success is the setting and achieving of worthy goals. And for me, success was learning how to advance confidently in the direction of my own dream and to endeavor to live a life that only I could imagine, where I would find that success in uncommon hour. And Thoreau said that. And that idea was born into me, I think, with my eyes and the conflict that I was created into and the adversity that I had from the very initial days of my life.
Right. All right. And I want to go back to that statement. All right. So you said when you're in conflict, you can't be your best, but you must have conflict to accelerate growth. And so does that mean then you need to be in constant conflict to continue to grow, but then you'll never be your best?
Well, no. If you ask somebody, if they're going in to take a test, let's say a test to get into medical school, and they're in conflict, there's no way that they can perform at their highest level. And so it's the conflict that they've had along the way that allows them to retrain their brain so that when they do step into moments of pressure, that they don't let that conflict impact how they make decisions and what decisions they make.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What was your light bulb moment with regard to, moving forward in your life with the condition you had? When did it just always oh, okay, here it is?
At St. Paul's. It was the coaches and teachers at St. Paul's. I'll never forget, Sandy Santoli was my high school ninth grade basketball coach. And at St. Paul's, we had an intramural league. And we were members of the team, and we coached the little kids, the fourth and fifth graders in an intramural league. And it was boys and girls. We had about 10 minutes, 20 minutes to practice each week. And I wanted to coach and teach. I knew I wanted to do it. And so in that 10 minutes, I would lay in bed and I have that Larry Bird poster, the 3-peat poster above my bed, and thinking about what could I draw up? What play could I call that would actually be able to win the game? Because most of the games, you'd win them 4-2 or 6-4. They were just really tight games because nobody really knew how to play basketball. And so my little brother, Zach, was on the team, and he was the only one that actually could dribble the ball. And I came up with this idea that called play number one. And what I thought to myself was, if he holds up the number one and I go, I'll tell all the other kids to go and set up down on the blocks and on the wings. And when he holds up the number one and he dribbles up, if he holds up the number one, then they go running into the stands. And so I told the kids, when he holds up the number one, I want you to go run in the stands and give your parents a hug. And so it's a man-to-man league. You were forced to play man-to-man. You could not play zone. And so, when we teach little kids man-to-man defense at that age, what we teach them is we say, you go where they go. And my thought was, if they go running up into the stands, that the other kids will follow them because that's what we told them to do. You go where they go. That's man-to-man defense when you're in fourth grade. And so he holds up number one, dribbles down, holds up number one. They go run in the stands. The other kids follow him. Parents start laughing. And he jab steps to the left and he goes and he lays the ball in and scores. And we're up 2-0 with probably 1 minute left in the game. And Coach Santoli stopped the game and he came over to me and he said, you're going to be a great coach one day, just not today. I'm waving the basket. That's an illegal play. And I'll never forget that in that moment, he affirmed and validated the worth and potential in me in such a clear way that for the first time I could see it for myself. And I walked out of that gym and I said, I'm going to coach and teach on an ever increasing stage. And that was the moment for me.
Right. And you did that, but now you also played high school football and college football, right?
I did. I played for Bob Rutledge and Charlie Miller, and at St. Paul's, two incredible coaches. They understood this simple idea that you can only develop people as far as they trust you. And they built all kinds of trust within me. And because of that, we were able to have relationships that pushed me every day. When you have people in organizations and they're not performing at a high level, there are not many guarantees in life, Rod, but one of the guarantees that we do know is that if you're leading other people, is that at some point they're not going to perform the way that you want them to. And you have two choices at that point. You can either get rid of them, which creates fear and panic and anxiety, or you can invest in them. And what Charlie and Bob and my coaches at Millsaps, Tommy Raniger, did for me is they made investments in ways that they knew how. And ultimately, that kind of trust led to me developing in ways that I didn't even think were possible. What I think, and I think the great takeaway for the audience, is that we're living in a coaching revolution. And that revolution says that we either are a coach or we have a coach, or we don't want to be coached. And in the world we live in today, if you don't want to be coached, you're going to be left behind. And I learned that from being coached by people like Bob and Charlie and Tommy Raniger at Millsaps.
I want to put those three together. All right, so you say we're in a coaching revolution.
Yeah, you either are a coach, have a coach,
Okay.
or don't want to be coached. And if you don't want to be coached, you're going to be left behind. Because here's what happens. We all reach this ceiling of complexity. You've had it in your career. I've had it in mine. And we say, I thought I'd be a lot further along down the road than I am today. And what I think we need more than anything is someone that has been there, that can step in there and that can show us the way and do that through coaching.
I got you. Well, and is part of that you get a certain point in your career and you think you're at the point where you know everything, and you then somehow you kind of stagnate, and you need somebody to teach you or coach you to push you along?
Well, if you ever get to a point in your career where you think you know everything, then you're in the wrong career. You know as well as I do, in my little business and the success that I've had in my little business outside of higher education, I say to myself all the time, Colby, you know what used to work. And innovation means you go first. And you go first to what you want to become. And so I think all of us better adapt that growth mindset, that we're all people that are continuing to be lifelong learners along the way. And that's part of a mindset that you develop, that you never stop growing. That's the hard part, right? You got to be better tomorrow than you are today. Hey, Rod, tell me about what you're doing in life. Tell me what you're doing in business. Tell me what you know you should be doing, and you're not doing it. Well, Colby, I know I should be doing this, but I'm not doing it. Well, wait a minute now. What we said is you got to be better tomorrow than you are today. Well, don't ask me about Tuesday, Colby. Tuesday was a really bad day for me, and that's where we get into. Those are the ruts that we get into in life, and you've got to have people around you. Identity capital begets identity capital. You got to get around people that can help pull that out of you. I've been fortunate enough along the way to meet some super talented people that have helped me figure that out. Unless you're a GOAT, and we can have a long discussion about that, the greatest of all time, and we know who they are. We all got a whole lot to learn along the way.
Right. You play college football, and I think one of the themes that permeates through your whole story is the coaching. I mean, it's that I think it began with your parents, teaching you how to be an auditory learner. You're coaching at high school, and what did you get out of your coaching in college when you were playing college football? Yeah,
so I was a middle child. My older brother did it first. My younger brother did it better. And I was always stuck in the middle. And the need for achievement is learned. You're not born with achievement. It's not born into you. Achievement is something that you learn along the way. And so this idea of using adversity to accelerate growth, it came to me from being a middle child. It came to me from my parents being at St. Paul's when I was there. My dad used to stop me all the time. He'd say, hey, I heard this happened this weekend. You got one chance to tell me if it's true or not. And if it is, then you and I are going to have serious conversations here. Yes, it's true. All right, see me at home. We're going to have a discussion about this. So constant adversity to accelerate growth, learning life lessons along the way. But the theme through all that are great coaches. And I'll never forget, and Coach Raniger, who was my college football coach at Millsaps, my brother went to Rhodes, played football there. And I was not able to attend Rhodes because I think my brother had a pretty good time there. And they said, we think Colby would probably be a better fit somewhere else. And so I go to Millsaps, and it changed my life. Millsaps was this school that helped me understand how to become a student of the process. And that really happened on the football field. And so we were playing Sewanee up on the mountain, and we lost that day. And I can still smell the diesel fumes. And I'm sitting there, and Coach Raniger always pointed at with two fingers out and his thumbs up. He never pointed with one finger. And he said, boys, do you know why we lost the game today? And he called me Corey. He did not call me Colby because he thought it was silly that someone would name their child Colby in the 1970s, because now it's 1990 and I'm playing for him at Millsaps. And he said, no, I'm going to call you Corey. And he said, the reason we lost the game today is because Corey don't know how to play defensive tackle. So if you see him, tell him, Corey, you lost the game for us. Well, I'm standing right there, like 10 feet from him. And you talk about using adversity to accelerate growth. And so I'm walking to get on the bus, and I can still remember what that felt like. And Flint Minshew, whose son Gardner Minshew now plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was one of the defensive tackles that I played with. And he's a real country guy. And he says, he called me Colby. He wouldn't say Colby. He said, Colby, Coach Raniger only picks on people he likes. And hell, he must love you. And so I got on that bus and I put that Better Than Ezra tape in my tape player, my Walkman, laid on the bus floor. And I said to myself, if this is as bad as it gets, I'm going to be okay. And that's part of a mindset. If what we're really talking about here with how to use adversity to accelerate growth, and I think you're a great example of it, and the guests that you bring on your show are great examples of it, is it's emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is the number one predictor of performance in the workplace. Emotional intelligence is something that can be taught and learned. Every study out there that says this, it says that emotional intelligence, leaders that have it outperform leaders that don't. And there's a new field of study that's coming out that says we've now evolved to not only emotional intelligence, but of adversity quotient. And adversity quotient, singling into an emotional intelligence, is the number one predictor of performance. Resiliency, bounce back. And if I look back on my life and the Coach Ranigers and the Bob Rutledge, we lost to UMS. I'm still mad about it today. I have anxiety about going to Mobile because we never won that game, and I hate it. But we lost that game, and I get on that bus and I'm in tears, and he comes over and he grabs me by the neck and he said, "You better quit that crying." He said, "You didn't prepare yourself, and I didn't prepare you." And I love that. I love that he was willing to say, "I didn't prepare you." He made it clear that I didn't do my part too, but all of us together didn't do it. And so what's the takeaway from that? The takeaway is if you want to win, guess what you have to do? Show up prepared. And adversity teaches you how to do that.
Yeah. And I guess that's why those, you got teams that lose and lose and lose, and then they finally break through. And once they break through, that they've used the adversity in the past to finally get there. And then, once they get there, they don't want to go back.
Well, yeah, Gladwell says in Outliers, he says it takes 10 years or 10,000 hours to have a significant breakthrough in your life. 10 years, 10,000 hours. And so if somebody in your audience is sitting there saying, when is the moment going to happen for me? When am I going to get the chance that I want? There's 10 years of struggle to have significant breakthrough. And I think we live in a culture today where people that are starving for connection, and connection is why we're here. I think that they're looking for significance over success. They want to find that. And that happens through adversity.
All right, after college, you get a job at Belhaven University to actually start a football program.
Yeah.
Tell me about that and tell us that story, because I think that is fascinatingly interesting.
Yeah. And again, going back to how was I born with birth defects? How was I born to two educators? How was I a middle child? How was I born with a brother that was seemingly better than me in every way in sports and academics that I constantly tried to keep up with? The answer to me all is I think that it was all put in front of me as a series of moments that leads me right up to where we are today. And Belhaven is no different. I was fortunate enough to meet one of the greatest mentors that I've ever had, a guy named Norman Joseph. And Norman played at Mississippi State, holds all kinds of coaching accolades in terms of offensive production, and is an incredible human being. And he understands the idea of developing other people. And while Coach Raniger was great at battle testing people and had that old school approach to people and challenge, Coach Joseph had a completely different approach. He understood that idea that you could only develop people as far as they trust you. And so I didn't know Norman. I heard about this opportunity. I was finishing my Ph.D. at Southern Miss, and I heard about this opportunity, and I wanted to coach college football, and they were starting this football program at Belhaven. And so I called him, and not knowing him, and I said, Norman, my name's Colby Jubenville, and I'm going to call you every day until you call me back. And I was scared doing that. I would pace the floors. I would practice what I was going to say, and I could ultimately only get those words out when I first called him. And so he finally called me back and he said, Colby, I don't know who you are, but you're damn determined. Meet me at the Waffle House in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and you can tell me about why you think you'd be a great coach. Well, he had like 400 resumes for this. That's not an exaggeration. I saw on his desk, there's hundreds of resumes for this position to start this college football team. And so I go there and he orders like a double covered chunked dice, whatever you order at Waffle House, and I ordered a water. I was so nervous. You know what it's like interviewing at your first job. We'll multiply that by 100 and interviewing at a Waffle House. I mean, the amount of stress and sweat and stickiness is at a very, very, very exponentially high level. And so we get done, and he says, Colby, there's two things that I know about you. Number one, you don't know anything about coaching offensive line. And the backstory is that I was coaching at Petal Middle School prior to coaching at Belhaven. And I said, no, I really don't. And he said, but I do think this. I do think if I gave you the opportunity that you would go out and recruit the right people and you could get them to come to school here and we could win championships. And I said, Coach, I know that I can do that if you'll give me the shot. And he said, you show up at my office tomorrow at 4:30. I can't pay you until the next budget cycle starts, but we'll start breaking film down at 4:30. If you want to do that, you can come and do that. And I lived in a condemned dorm there on campus, me and all the ghosts of, I think it was Baycoat Hall. I can't remember the name of it, but that's what's hitting the bell at this moment. And we built a program from the ground up. No phones, no computers, no players, no uniforms, just a dream. And we ended up 21st in the nation in the top 25 towards the end of the season. And I'll never forget, Norman asked me to order some footballs, and I go over, and for some reason we were aligned with the provost, and I went to him to get these footballs ordered, and he crossed out the number that I had there and put like 2. I said, well, we've got practice. And he said, well, you only play with 1 and you really don't need more than 2. And so that's where we started to build a football program. But we recruited 100 kids, and I think I stay in touch with those kids today. In fact, one of them texted me this morning. They all called me Coach Jube, and he said, Coach Jube, what you up to? How you doing? Things good for you? I miss you. I miss the days at Belhaven. And it's those moments of adversity that connected all of us in ways that are so meaningful still today.
What was it about the building of that college football program from the ground up? I mean, what was it that was so important about that how that affected your life?
I'll never forget, we were sitting on this hill that looked out to where would become the stadium 20 years later. And he said, what's it going to be like 20 years from now when they've got 100 players and they've got a stadium and they've got all the resources and all the coaches and all the things that they need to be successful? And I said, yeah, this is just the beginning of that. And I don't know the answer to that. And he said, well, here's what I do know, Colby. He said, all my job here with you is to help you take the next step. And once somebody invests in you in that way and creates such trust and expectation, he did that in one sentence. The only job I have here is to help you take the next step. He set the expectations so high for me that I would run through a brick wall for that guy. And then the trust that he built to let me, I trust you to go and do it. At 29 years old, I trust you to go and help me build this program. And I think that was something that I look back and I said, that's a leader that I want to follow versus a leader that I have to follow.
But in life, though, everybody doesn't have great coaches or people that are, that take an interest in them and want to make sure that they do well. And then these people, they hit adversity. And some of them, some of them don't respond like you would hope that they would. Some people just, they just give up. Some people don't accelerate their growth through adversity. What do you tell those people that unfortunately do not have this great support system?
Well, I think the most inexpensive, expansive textbook on the planet, and whoever came up with, if somebody that's out in the education field that believes that textbooks are the best way to educate people, then please call me so I can walk you through why that may not be the best case to do it. We live in an education system, Rod, that says there's one answer to this problem. And it's on the back of the book on page 47. That's the education system that you and I grew up in. That economy does not exist anymore. Ultimately, what you're asking me is how do we educate the next generation of people to live in the economy that has not even been created yet? And the answer to that question is, you say, oh, Colby, they don't have a coach. They don't have a mentor. Google has everything that you could ever want. There's this thing called a TED Talk that are only the best ideas. And so if you type in TED Talk in the topic, it will give you the information you need. The scariest part about being a kid today is it's not about getting information. The information is readily available. It's about getting there, and adults, by the way, getting the right information and then putting yourself in a position to use it. The knowledge economy that Drucker talks about, he says this, that we live in a knowledge economy, and people that are successful in it know and understand two things. They know and understand their value, and they put themselves in a position to use it. That's a scary, scary idea. And what you're really asking me is about what Don Shula said in the very beginning when he started coaching. He said, don't let the start stop you. What Steve Harvey says is you can sit back and not take the jump, but there's a 100% guarantee that it won't happen for you if you don't. And so we've got this technology today. To me, Google is the coach. You can find a video about anything. If you don't like to read, great. There's a video about any subject that will allow you to be successful.
You kind of may have just already answered this about, going to Google and finding things, but what do you tell people that are, they're going through some tough times. Maybe they don't have the drive to improve themselves. Based on what you've learned in your life, what can you tell the listeners about this is the best way to handle adversity?
Well, the very first thing when I hear adversity, the very first thing that I say to myself, I don't say, why did this happen to me? What I say is, what is this trying to teach me? And the second thing I say is, and what did I contribute to this to make this adverse situation? Because in my experience, what I have landed on is that most of the adversity in my life was created probably by myself.
Right.
And I think that's the case for most of us. So I think that's a really simple way to internalize the adversity that's happening, because it's really easy, and I've done it. Self-pity is a dangerous thing, and you can sit in it for a while. But once you do decide to step out of that, I think by saying, instead of saying, why is this happening to me? What can I learn from it? And what did I contribute to it? I think those are powerful questions that will allow you to find a way to make sense of it. We're all trying to make sense of our lives, right? Everybody here, you are, I am, we're all trying to make sense of our lives. And if you understand that struggle teaches us three things, it teaches us how to think better, communicate better, and make better decisions. Think about how crazy this is. What's the only civilization in the world that says sit in your pain? What's the only group of people that say sit in your pain? Every other group says we're going to figure out a way out of it. The Greeks, what did they say with pain? We'll create medicine. That's how we'll handle pain. There's one group of people that said, no, you need to sit in your pain and you need to feel it. And it's the Jewish people. That's part of who they are. They said, we're going to sit in this pain and we're going to feel it. And part of that feeling is part of what we have to find the success or find our way out of it that we want. If God, or if you're not a religious person, however you want to frame this up, if they give you anger, if they give you sadness, these feelings that we have with adversity, it's not just about anger and sadness. It's about asking yourself, well, what is it that I'm hungering for? What is it that I want to find out of this that I'm not getting because of this adversity in my life? And I think that's a powerful idea. Somebody else told me that. They said, who is the only civilization that says, no, don't take medicine, don't take religion to figure your way out of the pain. Sit in your pain and feel it. And I think that was a very powerful idea for me, to sit in your own pain.
Well, I guess that's like, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah.
You got to understand it, to feel it, to get out of it. And also an important part of that is know you don't want to get back in it.
Yeah, that's the second part, maybe the hardest part, right? We know we don't want to get back in it, but we are all human beings. And somehow we find ourselves right back in those moments. But I think that struggle helps you think better, communicate better, make better decisions.
Right. We all go through adversity. And so if we all did this, if we all, use our adversity to accelerate our growth, God, as a society, we just, we'd be at the very top. But the fact of the matter is that, unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way it happens that way for some people. But I guess the thing that, and hopefully we can convey this to the listeners, I think we have, is that, the light bulb moment, from this podcast is that, you do got to use your adversity, and it's going to happen to you. And so how can you use your adversity to become a better person, to be better at your job, to be a better person? And I'm not a very religious person, but I think the book of James it basically says that, you need to revel in your adversity.
Yeah. I'm an amateur on the Bible myself, so I'll speak in a limited capacity of that. But adversity is something that I'm fluent in. And think about this. I thought about this podcast and think about this. Doesn't it seem like when one thing of your life is going right and everything's going right, then one thing falls apart And then you'll get the one thing that's not working right. And then the next thing that was working right, then that doesn't work. So one day your marriage isn't the way you want it to be, but your work is. And then a year later, your work's not where it wanted to be, but your marriage is, right? And I think standing in that and believe and understanding that is part of the joy of life, the human experience. Failure is what makes us who we become. I've written 2 books, and all I could keep telling myself when I wrote those 2 books is, who in the world's going to read these books? That's the first thing you say to yourself. The first brain ability is I can do it. The second brain ability is I can't do it. And the third brain ability is I'm going to do it. And that's what happens. And so when I finally got past the point of saying, I don't really care who reads these books, I'm not doing it for them, I'm doing it for me, I created the covers, and I put the covers in front of my computer, and when I type, it's the covers that motivated me to do it. And it goes back to that idea of, what are you searching for? Success or significance? And for me, leaving books to my kids that they'll be able to have is something that was really important to me, and something that drove me to not only write it, but then get it published by Wiley and cross that off my list of things I wanted to accomplish.
Well, does it have to be success or significance? Can it be success and significance?
It's an interesting question. I think probably in our generation, I was born in 71. I think that there was a notion that you could either make a living or you could make a life, and you had to choose between the two. I think today, in the economy that we live in, one of the biggest traps that happens in our lives is that we teach people they should build their business or their career before they build their life. And what we should do is help people build their life before they build their career.
Colby, let me, and I do this with every guest because, we got to wrap it up, but give the listeners your parting shots. The podcast has been fantastic with, advice and just life experience and, using adversity. But what's the last thing you want to say to the listeners?
Well, I would say this. If I look back on my life, it's the coaches that made the difference. It's the coaches that made the difference. And so the question is, who's coaching you? We get to that point where we have this ceiling of complexity and we don't know how to get through it. I've been there. And the only way that you get through it is you get around people who are better than you, that can give you, and you borrow from that identity capital, and they make investments in you. And those investments are what push you over the top.
And then as you grow as a person, then you need to be that coach for other people.
Yeah, I think that's the greatest gift that we have. I mean, Maslow, in his hierarchy of needs, he talks about the highest point of the hierarchy of needs is that you reach this level where you become self-actualized. And on his deathbed, what he said that was so powerful is that it's not about you becoming self-actualized. It's about you helping other people become self-actualized. What I say in that moment is you find your voice, the intersection of talent, passion, conscience, and need in the world. And then you help somebody else find their voice. That's the greatest gift that you can have.
Colby, and now if people want to follow you, get your books, follow you, I know you do a podcast. Yeah. How can they do that?
Thank you for asking that. I just launched the GOAT Consulting podcast. I've been talking about doing a podcast for years, and I finally found the right people and the right ideas and the right theme. And we've launched that, and I think we're in our 8th batch, and that's been fun to do. And it's the GOAT Consulting podcast. So certainly they can look that up on anywhere that they listen to podcasts or download podcasts. My website is drjubenville.com, drjubenville.com. And I'm on LinkedIn at Dr. Jubenville. I would say that I'm on other social media channels, but I'm still trying to catch up there, Rod. In our 20s, we try to get in the game. In our 30s, we try to move up in the game. In our 40s, we try to stay in the game because those 30-year-olds are so damn good. And so damn good is the technology. In our 50s, we say, what is it I really want? And I really don't even want my Facebook account or my Instagram account anymore. So if you want to find me on the telephone. How about that?
All right. Okay. Well, Colby, thanks so much for doing this. I think this has been a great episode. It's great, having somebody from Mobile coming on the show. It's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, I heard your episode with Scott Christmas and was totally blown away. Obviously, I've known him my whole life, but the way that was put together and encapsulated and that story, and I know that your listeners will resonate with that, and reached out to you and happy to be a guest today and love what you do. And certainly we'll keep listening and support it.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Colby.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
while the Colby Jubenville episode took Rocket Motivation to another level with advice on how to use adversity to accelerate growth in your life. Rocket Motivation is all about handling adversity. Next week's guest is Jessie Strawham. She was in a motorcycle accident that left her paralyzed from the waist down. She's going to tell you her inspiring story. See you next week. Thanks for listening to the show. If you're interested in getting my book, Get Back Up, just go to Amazon and put in Get Back Up and my name, Rod Caden. It'll pop right up. I would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast and rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. I would really appreciate it if you'd share it with a friend. I would like as many people to hear my message as possible. And we'll see you next week. Never give up and always get back up.